Good afternoon, Dr. Sanford and classmates. Today it is my pleasure to present my interpersonal communications project. Next slide. My agenda. I will start with an introduction of what interpersonal communication is. I will next lay the foundation for future success by presenting my overarching goal for life and a definition of enlarging the conversation. I will then discuss my background and behavioral blend and how they have influenced my conversation skills positively and negatively. We will next define potential barriers and how I'm going to address them. Finally, I'll present my action plan. I will present the actions I will take in order to make my personal communication goals a reality. Next slide. What is interpersonal communications? Stewart states communication is best viewed as the continuous, complex, and collaborative process of verbal and nonverbal meaning making. Stewart then goes on to say interpersonal communication can be understood as one end of a continuum that has impersonal communications at the other end. Finally, the definition Stewart gives for interpersonal communication is type or kind of communication that happens when the people involved talk and listen in ways that maximize the presence of the personal. When communicators give and receive or talk and listen in ways that emphasize their personal or uniqueness, unmeasurability, responsiveness, reflectiveness, and addressability, then the communication between them is interpersonal. Next slide. Why is interpersonal communications important? Well, first, Stewart states there's a direct connection between the quality of your communication and the quality of your life. Next, communications is where humanness happens. And finally, Klein says listening is seen as essential in almost any vocational setting. The importance of communications is seen in every aspect of our lives, relationships, work, and even our perception of being human. Next slide. My overarching goal is to improve my abilities to communicate as a leader, a friend, a husband, and a father. I want to be closer and more connected to those around me. My ability to connect, know, and relate will be enhanced by my ability to improve my listening skills. Burley Allen states, "It is difficult to understand others until we learn to listen effectively to ourselves. This will lead to a happier, more fulfilling life." Next slide. These two verses bring a biblical focus to my pursuit of improvement. Both show the importance of listening in both interactions with others and decision making. Next slide. How can I enlarge the conversation? Ask open and clarifying questions, which assist the speaker come up with their own solutions for their problems. Focus on actively listening by becoming a level 1 listener. Work on being a more empathetic listener to be able to see and understand what is actually going on while remaining genuine. Talk without accusing, attacking, labeling, or judging. I must understand the speaker's background and experiences to know them. For this, I must allow the speakers to reveal themselves to me, and I must reveal myself to them. Next slide. My behavioral blend is DIC. I tend to be dominant, inspiring, and cautious. My being task-oriented leaves me sometimes failing to focus on the people I work with. I need to focus more on the one-on-one and not always on the group dynamic. My background consists of being raised by my mother and father with a younger brother and sister. As a child, I participated in numerous sports and activities, always looking to stay out of my neighborhood, which was poor and drug infested. Very competitive and always looking to excel, I was an outcast in my neighborhood. Church was an avenue where I first learned about leadership. My tendencies to impersonal communication can be a cause of 22 years of military leadership that is not focused on empathy. I've always been task-oriented as at the age of 18 I became an assistant manager and had to learn to separate from workers my own age. After 25 years of marriage and the birth of my 2 sons, I know I must work on my communication skills to connect with my family and others. Next slide. My behavioral blend shows that I do not lead others well from an intimate perspective. I will avoid closeness to others to hide my flaws. This does not allow for self-disclosure and empathetic understanding I need in communications and leadership abilities. Next slide. Burley Allen tells us that noise pollution is factors that influence us to be distracted from listening effectively at level 1. Burley Allen also states a listening barrier exists when someone hears what he wants to hear and not what is really communicated. There are 2 types of noise pollution: internal noise and external noise. Next slide. External pollution consists of barriers that are normally physical, such as loud noises, distractions, speech, and hearing. To overcome these barriers, find a peaceful place. Go to a place where there are less distractions. Stop doing 2 or 3 things at once and actually focus on listening. If speech is a problem, ask for clarification and ensure understanding. To avoid internal distractions, stay in the present moment. Acknowledge and respond to the person speaking. Be aware of the speaker's total communication. Be empathetic to the speaker's feelings. Suspend personal thoughts while listening. Sounds easy, it's not. Next slide. My potential barriers are biased and empathetic listening. Also, I tend to own the speaker's problems. Prejudice and judgmental attitudes force others to react to us negatively. Empathetic listening will allow for level 1 listening. With my behavioral blend of DIC, I have a tendency to talk too much and not listen enough. I prefer to tell people how to fix their problems and fail to allow them the ability to keep ownership. If I utilize the talker-listener card, conversations will lead to the empowerment of my subordinates. Next slide. My action plan is to avoid biased and prejudicial attitudes. I must go into conversations with a clear and open mind to allow our relationships to grow. Avoiding preconceptions can lend us to truly not hearing what people say and know how they will react in future situations. To improve my communications process, I must work on self-disclosure, meaning looking at my self-awareness and self-acceptance. Self-disclosure must have depth and breadth to enhance the communication process. The relationship that is built through open and fierce conversations can provide stability to organizations in times of turmoil. My behavioral blend leads me to keep my relationships shallow, thus missing on the intimacy and softer moments experienced in relationships that are more robust. Hurtful messages. As a leader, we must identify when and where hurtful messages may arise in our conversation. We may also have to develop a hurtful message to be honest to those we lead, to develop our situation or strategies for future growth. The identification of hurtful messages allows the leader to develop how to overcome the negative aspects of a hurtful message. I must also work to create an environment that physically enhances communications. Finally, I must incorporate Bible study to enhance the lessons that are laid out to act as a better Christian leader. Next slide. Interpersonal communication takes time to practice and implement, but leads to a more fulfilling life. It's hard work, but it's worth it. Thank you.